Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before starting, I have a little announcement to do. My wife, who's here, will have a show at the Maison de la Culture Côte des Neiges tomorrow night, 5 to 7. You're all invited. It's, I don't know if you see where it is. It's on Côte des Neiges, near Queen Mary, near Jean-Briand, near the metro Côte des Neiges. So I'm happy to say that. And also, I'm happy to say that you have just been received in the Royal Canadian Academy. So okay, now we'll get to my lecture. As you have seen, you know that we are in, maybe some of you are new to this series, but we are in the middle of a series with around realism. With a painter we still have to deal with, meaning Émile Carr today and Alfred Pellan next time, and finally Colville. You will understand that the meaning of realism is changing. It's not exactly, these people have nothing to do with the trompe-l'œil, for instance, that we were discussing last time. They take figuration in a much more free way. Mind you, maybe with Colville, as you will see, we go back to this kind of very acute type of realism. But even for him, it's not completely true. You know, for instance, that he suppressed completely the shadows of personage and animals, and it gave a kind of a floating aspect to the object in his painting, and that's why he was called a magic realist instead of just a realist. And so with these three painters, you will see we move from the type of realism we have dealt with up to now. They are much more touched by, let's say, modernism, and they don't have this kind of very accurate or photographic type of realism that we have seen up to now. In the case of Émile Carr, of course, the more well-known painting, I will just evoke them rapidly at the beginning, but you will see the painting I want to deal with are a little bit less known. It is her early period where she was really wanting to represent the Indians of British Columbia and their art as she saw it. And really then her intention was to be as close as possible to their reality. And this, of course, cannot apply to all her work, and especially not to his later work, who have the forest as the main theme. So I want to evoke that, but in fact, to be closer to my subject, I will deal mainly with her Indian motif, that was also important at the beginning of her career. Let's see, to start with, just to evoke this, I think it's interesting to make a contrast between Émile Carr's view of the forest and, let's say, one of the group of seven, and of course the one who was closer to her, I thought Lauren Harris, that you have evoked on the other side of the screen. This painting is very famous, the one near me, which is called Gray. Really like just the name of a color, if you want. 1929, 1930. And as I told you, the stuff I will deal with is much older than that, but let's say this is quite typical of her work. And to put it in contrast, to understand one aspect of their attitude toward the forest is very, very different. With many members of the group of seven, and particularly with Harris, you would think that the forests, in a way, have to disappear to reveal the sky, to reveal the immensity of space. And it's very true for Harris. Even not only the forest is not very important, it's not, but the trees that you see in the foreground are dead. As if the death of the forest is the condition to the revelation or the manifestation of heaven, of the sky. And truth comes from above in Harris. Truth comes from this world who is evoked by this huge space. It's a painting that he made on the north shore of Lake Superior. So you can imagine the lake is like the sea there, really. There's no horizon. And then you have all these clouds piling like that and creating this aspect of sky. If you have followed one of the lectures I gave at the very beginning of that series, I think 3 years ago, I was referring to an Italian philosopher who's called Gambista Vico, who explained in a kind of mythology of the origin of religion. He says the first man, let's say the prehistoric man, were living in forests, and suddenly they heard thunder, and they wanted to know what it was, so they climbed trees, and they discovered the sky. And they imagined that there was a very powerful force there, and they destroyed slowly the forest to see better the sky, to see the God who is in the sky. Okay, this is a myth. We don't know how religion really started. But it's interesting that in the Occidental tradition, you have always this idea that the forest is what is hiding the revelation of God, the revelation of the divine, as if one cannot go with the other. And Harris, who have been very much involved in theosophy, was interested in this kind of idea of revealing the divine, revealing the sublime, let's say, that you could see from the sky. And maybe intuitively, he felt that this goes with the deforestation, with the destruction of the forest. If you look now at the Emily Carr, you have a completely different point of view. First of all, you would have almost no sky at all in her depiction of this huge tree who occupied all the surface. Not only that, you have almost the feeling that the tree have an eye here. So in the middle, somewhere, as if there was a kind of watching presence in the forest. And indeed, just before that, some of her charcoal drawings show a mixture of, let's say, totem poles and trees, as if the heart of the Indian were like the watching spirit of the forest. Now she doesn't need it in a way because it's expressed already in the shape of the tree, but certainly this idea that the forest is a presence, it's something to be respected and not to be just destroyed to reveal something else. Even if they were very close, Harris and Carr, you know that they met in 1927. What happens, Eric Brown, who was the director of the National Gallery at the time, more or less discovered Emily Carr. Anyway, he wanted to have her in a show in Ottawa, and she came for the show. It was a kind of I would say a kind of odd type of presentation where you had some painters of the group of 7, and Emily Carr and some others, confronted with artifacts from the First Nations. So you had a mask and a little totem, and suddenly you saw a painting of these people, as if there was a kind of Canadian ethos there where everybody could meet. You see the natives and us, we can have the same room and show all together. So she came to Ottawa, and then on her way back, she stopped in Toronto and met Harris then, and they become friends. Emily Carr never went too far in this theosophical type of thought that Harris was involved with, but she certainly had spiritual inkling and interest and all that, and with Harris, this was, of course, the perfect man to discuss it. So they were very close, but their conception of the forest is very different. They are almost opposite in a way. And you have this idea that in one, a kind of, I would say in Harris, a kind of indifference to the fate of the forest. Not at all in the case of Emily Carr. Even in the group of 7, you will see expressed also not even indifference about the fate of the forest, but a certain enthusiasm for the job of the loggers, the people who cut the trees and all that. This is exciting. This is the development of a new country. This is a new industry and all that. They have this feeling of what Paul Walton called the extractionist myth. The land is there to just give us energy resources, and we just have to exploit it and all that, and who cares what happened after? You could destroy everything, but at least, like in a way, you destroy everything, but at the end you discover that you cannot eat money. Anyway, well, this is a part of our philosophy, but this is very opposite to Emily Carr. For instance, I will show you a few other examples of her thinking. This is a painting she calls Swaying, because in a way it describes well the movement that you see in the upper part of the painting here, as if the trees were really moving. That's why she called it that way. It's a painting of 1936 at the Mike Michael collection, you know, near Toronto in Kleinburg, a beautiful setting there. So they have a good collection of Carr. And she described in her writings, because you know she's an important Canadian writer also. Emily Carr have a wonderful style in writing also. She's very fun to read also. She's interesting also. So she described a little bit her feeling about what we see in the foreground. You see the stumps with the leftover, let's see, of the work of the logger in the forest. And she says, there is a torn and splinter ridge across the stumps I call the screamers. And this is an interesting word. Of course, she created that. Nobody called it that way. These are the unsound last bits, the cry of the tree's heart wrenching and tearing apart just before she gives that sway and dreadful groan of falling. That dreadful pause while her executioner, this is not the way that the people will call the loggers, the executioners step back with their saws and axes, resting and watch. It's a horrible sight to see a tree fell even now, though the stumps are gray and rotting, a little bit like they are in this painting. As you pass among them, you see their screamers sticking up out of their own tombstone, as it were. They are their own tombstone and their own mourners. This is beautiful, and it represents a completely different feeling about life, about, I would say, ecology also in a way, and about the environment, and about the forest in particular. Very, very different. Okay, you will see, well, let's see this picture now with the revelation of the sky also, and maybe it's closer to Iris, but I'm not sure. The title of this is interesting. She's called Scorn as Timber, Beloved of the Sky. Scorn as timber, because it's too thin and you cannot do much with a tree like this, but beloved by the sky. And indeed, you could say that in Harris, the revelation comes from above. It's God speaking to us. Here, you could see the movement start from the earth and it's going up. And even the fact that you have this kind of arrow shape on the top of the little tree could indicate a movement toward the top and not from above toward the bottom. And you understand that the feeling is very, very different. Even if technically you could say, well, it's the same thing. The horizon is very low. The sky occupied almost all the painting, but the movement is very different. And then the title, again, it's an allusion to the survival of the forest. So even she had one painting was called Reforestation. So it cannot be clearer. You see in the foreground these little trees who start a new life, and the big one in the back are like parents, you see, watching their children a little bit. They are, and again, the sky is not very important. It's just you need it a little bit because you show mountain and all that. It's in the corner, but never with this kind of presence that you have in Iris. The different point of view. Also, let's say, the idea of creating a feeling that you are inside of the forest, that it's a world of itself, that you don't need something else. Yeah? Like in this beautiful late painting, Dancing Sunlight, of 1939-1940, she described it well also, the feeling we get from painting. He says, a main movement must run through the picture. And indeed, you have a kind of feeling of, like I was swaying before, but here again, with the light in the background and all that, you have this feeling of movement. The transition must be easy, not jerky. None must be out of step in the march. On, deeper and deeper, with the soul of the things burrowing into its depth and intensity, till that thing is a reality to us and speak one grand inaudible world, God. The movement and direction of line and plane shall express some attribute of God: power, peace, strength, serenity, joy. The movement should be so great the picture will rock and sway together, carrying the artist, and after him, the looker, with it, catching up with the soul of the thing and marching on all together. I think she expressed very well what we get here. Okay. The work I will deal with mainly, I wanted to present that, but I want to go now retrospectively, to go back in the past, in which you could say there is also a kind of completely new point of view, kind of revolution that Emily Carr will feel in the subject of Indian picture. But then she's dealing more with reality. She wanted to be close to these people, to their heart in particular. And she wanted to be accurate and all that. She was not very lucky to convince people of that. People find her style too free and all that. And we know, for instance, that she could not get really subvention or grants, let's say, for making her trips among the native people to depict that, because her work were, like one anthropologist says, not suited for anthropology. It's no good for anthropological purpose. And well, she's a good girl, but we cannot use it for serious purpose. So it's certainly one of her drama, because she really wanted to do that, to make a kind of documentation of what she saw. And okay, I will begin with this, and I think here, yeah. I had a photo, let's say, of the same subject, just to show you a little bit how she transposed and all that. This is a painting which is called Hallard Bay. Yeah? Hallard Bay is situated, I will show you in a map a little bit later, situated on Vancouver Island, but on the north, I would say, east part, northeast of Vancouver Island. And here is a photo of the same site. In a way, you see this totem here, you have it there. It's exactly the same one. And you see the fish on the top here, you see it here too. So it's done in a different angle, but it's the same location. And here what's happening, all these things accumulated there, it's what we call a potlatch. They were receiving another tribe and putting in their hands all the gifts they could imagine, all that. Anyway, I will come back on this also. What I want to make clear now, just to occupy your eyes with these two pictures, the idea I want to convey now, it is what happened when Emily Carr decided precisely to make this type of picture, to document, if you want, the Indian people, and to do it as accurately as she thought it should be done. It was what is original, I would say, in the point of view of Emily Carr, it is first to give importance to the art of the Indian. And if you remember what we spoke about Cain before, for Cain, this could not, he couldn't care less of their artistic production. The only aquarelle, the only watercolor I was able to show you representing some mask, you remember, were used after to make a kind of depiction of dance, and obviously it was not a big concern of this. And this is very striking with Emily Carr. The art of these people take the foreground, is the main subject. Secondly, I would say, through the art, she tried to understand their reality, their way of functioning, their vision of the world. And this is also very different, because that means that instead of depicting the Indian from outside, you let them show how they see the world, how they see yourself eventually, and through their heart, you give some room, let's say, to their own expression of their vision of the world, to their reality, in a way. And this was not at all evident at the time when she started to wanted to do this. What happened, the first appreciation, let's say, of Indian art was done in a very devious type of way. People begin to collect some artifacts of the native people as curios. This is the beginning. In 19th century, you will see indeed captain of ships and all that bringing back some of these things, but habitually finding them funny and bizarre, and just a proof that they were when they went far. See, this is always very good. You see, when a guy make a tour of the world, like Captain Cook or others, they come back in their valise with a lot of masks and things like that. So look how the crazy people I met and how terrible they live and all that, and you bring some souvenirs. And it was calling curiosity, in fact, not work of art. It's not, they are not perceived like a word of art. Another word they were using also, it was toy. And this behind of that, of course, there is this idea that the production of the native is childish. It's like toys. It's their mentality is not to evaluate, or also it's not surprising. They make little gadgets like this, and we collect this, and we bring it back, and it's a nice conversation piece. One of the things that they will try to collect more, and I would say, I would just make a reference to that, it was things that could underline and manifest more the physical difference between Indian and us. Anything that could have secure our racial identity, I would say, was collected with more interest. And there was two usage that are constantly described and are being painted by Kane, by the way, that's why I put it there. I show you once, one of them. It is this idea of the flathead people, people who reduce the forehead of their children and make this kind of elongated head. So let's say it's an usage, we have other, but why to pick this one up? It is because it shows a big physical difference with us. And if it can be manifested through art, this is good. You see, this is, if we could even find, I don't know, maybe a depiction of these usage by the Indian himself, this is a curio that is worth to buy. The other, so this is for the people from the south of Vancouver Island. You do have some tribes that were using this type of technique to change their forehead and all that. They find it beautiful. We have other we pierce our ears, our nose, we pierce everything. Now, anyway, and each tribe has its own usage, us included. The other one in the north that they were very excited about was this type of usage where they were using what we call a labret, I think you say in English, L-A-B-R-E-T. It comes from lips, in a way, in Latin, and it's a thing they were putting in the lower lip to extend it, like you see there. They call it, the title of the picture by Kane, he says, a Babine woman. If there's one French-Canadian here in the room, he will know exactly what a babine is. Babine is big lips. Hein? Ferme ta babine, quelque chose comme ça. It's not gracious. It's not the thing that you say. You don't say to your mother or to your sister. Babine, it's vulgar. It's not a word that we use all the time. So they used to call these people la babine, people of the babine or whatever. There's even apparently a babine lake in that region. And it is, in fact, people of the North Coast above Vancouver that had this usage. So then any mask, any representation of this labret thing would be collected. And indeed, you will find many examples of that in collection of today, beautiful masks in which you see this usage underlined. The Indian understood rapidly that this was saleable, that you could make money with this type of things, that the white were crazy enough to buy only this. So they produce it a lot, and you do find them in all the museums in the world, masks of that type with the kind of this elongated type of lips. The real thing, it looked like this. And here, this is a lady who is wearing a labret in a photograph, let's say. Habitually, the labret was worn by women only, and by noble women, habitually. It's a sign of nobility, and old women had a bigger one. In fact, we know exactly how it was done. You see, at the age of 12, 15, the girl were treated, they were cutting here a little piece, and then they introduced a little piece of bone or ivory and slowly extend the lips like this, and it was seen as a beautiful thing. Of course, these usage by the first travelers were considered like bizarre or barbarous and all that. One guy, Alexander, how he is called? Yeah, Captain Vancouver, who was, after whom was known the island of Vancouver and the city of Vancouver, used to say this is an instant of human absurdity. And being presented as such, of course, it was, again, I repeat, it was a way to stress the physical difference with us. Don't forget, in 19th century, the concept of race is very, very vivid. It's very important. And anything that could distance us from the natives was seen like interesting. Like another one says, it is easier for civilized people to deviate into the manner and custom of savage life than for savages to rise into a state of civilization. You see what there is behind this. Huh? We have to be very different from them because maybe we will fall in savagery. Maybe we will go back to that. We have to maintain this distance all the time. And anything you stress it is good. It's good to collect. It's good to show. But you see, this is the way that, in a way, Indian art entered in the Occidental system, in a way. Through, like a curio, and not anything is collected. Things that are collected are things that underline our difference, our physical difference with them. You see how it goes. What a contrast when you read the perception of Emily Carr of these custom and these the way you see it. She says, Indian art, not Indian life, Indian art, broadened my seeing, loosened the formal tightness I had learned in England schools. Its bigness and stark reality baffled my white man's understanding. I was as Canadian-born as the Indian, but behind me were whole world heredity and ancestry, as well as Canadian environment. The New West called me, but my whole world heredity, the flavor of my upbringing, pulled me back. I had been schooled to see outsides only, not struggle to pierce. Again, she always have the correct formula, but this kind of homage, let's say, that she gave to, not only to primitive life or something like that, because this you could find even in Rousseau or people like that, but to the art. The efficiency of this art, this, like you said, the boldness, the fact that it's big and strong and all that, this homage that she's doing is not common at the time. This is, then you have another perception of it. It's not curious and not something, it's really a kind of aesthetic response to this type of work. How she will, of course, this coincides in a way, if you want to put it in a broader context, with what was happening also in France at the time. This is also the time when we begin to discover the importance of the so-called primitive art. And for instance, just to evoke that rapidly, I put a Matisse picture on the left and a fang mask. The fangs are African people, and that was collected at the time. This fang mask have been seen by Matisse, and he used it to depict the face of his wife here. He find it interesting in terms of kind of hieratic form. It was, in fact, bought from Vlaminck, who is another fauve painter, by Derain, and it's there that Matisse saw it, and like Picasso also at the time, and they got all excited with these type of new work of art that he knew nothing about. Picasso began to collect them and all that, a little bit like predators, but they were excited by the form. And in a way, like Meyer Shapiro, one of the great art historians of today, have described well this kind of feeling that they got suddenly for this type of work. He says their attitude, the modernist painters, let's say, their attitude toward past art was also completely changed. The new style accustomed painters to the vision of colors and shapes has disengaged from object and created an immense confraternity of work of art cutting across the barrier of time and place. And it's exactly what happened. When you have this more abstract art that is beginning with the Cubism and all that, you have suddenly a common language with every work of art. Whatever the civilization they come from, whatever distance in time and space they come from, you suddenly have at least this common language of formal quality, let's say, of color and form and figure and movement and everything. And like Shapiro says, it created a kind of confraternity all over the world. Suddenly all these works were speaking to, even if you didn't know much about usage in the culture, concern, if you don't, to what they were used, what ceremony and what the magic and all that. This, in a way, even without that, you could refer to the work. You could assimilate it and find something from it. So, in a way, Émilie Carr is, in Canada, a good representant, let's say, of this type of reaction toward the so-called primitive art. How it all started for Émilie Carr, I will just try to evoke historically how it happens. She tells, of course, the story. We have to be careful with her way of presenting it. She exaggerates a little bit, and why not? The writer have some freedom to do what she wants. But let's say the first contact she had, really, with the native people was in 1897, so at the very end of the 19th century. She says, I was a little girl of 15 now. She was 27, but anyway, she was a little bit older. But it make it more dramatic. And in a way, what happened, she was invited by a Miss Armstrong, who was a Presbyterian missionary, who was exercising her ministry in a little village which was called Ucluelet. And Ucluelet is situated near Victoria, if you want, but on the coast of Vancouver Island. She tells the story how she take a little steamboat and went in the middle of the, almost in the night. I was alone on this boat. I was the only passenger. Not true. She was with her sister. But anyway, whatever little correction that pity art historian can do, you know, we have done it all. We have checked all this and above. But the main idea, of course, it is the kind of shock that this contact created on her. Yeah? So she come, of course, protected by this missionary thing. These people, she's not very attentive to the fate of the people, the Nukta people who were there. Yeah? In fact, they were in a terrible condition. There was no regulation on fishes and fishermen and all that, and they lived practically from the hunt of seals, and the seals were disappearing. They had no more salmon and all this. They were quite close to Victoria, so they couldn't compete with motor boats and things. And they were in very, very bad shape. There was outbursts of alcoholism and people trying to bootleg and all that to survive. Anyway, it was really not, and she didn't notice it too much. Mrs. Armstrong also will quit finally this ministry because they were impossible to convert to anything, and she will leave them there. But she doesn't describe, what she describes is more her interaction with these people. And it seems that it's there that she received her Indian name Clewick. Clewick or Tlewek means the one who laughs, the one who laughs easily. And she says, since I was not stuck up like my sister and the ministry, that I could know how to laugh, people call me Clewick. And you know that it's the title of one of her books about all her experience with encounter with native people. Okay, she called it that way, and she kept this word. She was probably very proud of this because at least she didn't know the language, of course, but at least she was perceived as a more positive type of person. Then she tried to paint what she see. And she tells a story about the difficulty she had with older people. Again, the explanation will sound familiar because we have met it already with Cain. You remember Mrs. Wynook. Okay, this is the lady who doesn't want to be painted by Émilie Carr. It's an old lady, an old Indian woman, told how the whole Indian thought the spirit of a person got caught in a picture of him, trapped there is so that after the person died, it had to stay in the picture. You remember I made an analysis of that about Cain, how this, but okay, so you have this also, Émilie Carr repeat that. But then she reacts in a very different way from Cain. Cain then says, oh, I told him that I would bring your picture to the queen, and the guy was very happy. You remember that story. Here, look how she says, and it's so typical. He says, tell her that, because of course she doesn't know the language. She go to interpret with Mrs. Armstrong translating everything. Tell her that I will not make any more picture of the old people. I said, it must have hurt the Indians dreadfully to have the things they had always believed trampled on and torn from their hugging. This is very important, also very good, because in a way it expresses in such a way that we can understand it and we can share the same feeling. Something that my image, what I am, is something that I hug, that I want to keep for myself. And anybody could have this feeling. It's not specific to some tribes who have crazy idea about the picture being the soul or things like that. You understand? This is the way to put it in such a way that we could share this experience, that we could understand it from inside, I would say. And I will not make picture of old people. And in fact, all the depiction that all the drawings that we have of Ukluelet, of this first encounter, will show children, but no adult. And they would show their houses, the canoe and things like that, but not adult. She kept her word in a way. Another example of these early drawings is this one, in which, as you see, in front you have two little girls here and a group of kids there too, and then the big houses, kind of a system in which you have an extended family living. So it's a big house in which each family has a little fire, if you want, but they live all together. She discovered, for instance, that it's not necessary to knock the door to enter these houses. The Indians were finding it funny. Why she knocks? She's stupid. And just come in and out. And so she tell about a little bit her first contact like that. Nevertheless, the first drawings are done in a way from outside. She's a sympathetic observer, and she's sensitive enough to feel, for instance, that if they don't want me to depict old people, I will not do it. I can't have no sensitivity of that kind. But on the other hand, she's outside. And she needed another experience really to get in a way, to the subject. And you see that, for instance, there, even if the Nukta people had any sculpture or things like that, mind you, they don't have much. They were really fishermen. They were going on the sea. They were canoeing, fantastic canoer and all that. But they are not famous for the sculpture, let's say. So maybe she saw less of that. But the experience that will really make a shock on her and make her discover the importance of the Indian art will be a trip that she will make in Alaska. Just a little bit after, let's see. It's a trip that she took in the summer of 1907. Well, what happened? Her sister Lizzie cut her finger in the kitchen, and she was very depressed, so she decided to bring her with her to make a trip, you see, to see the world a little bit. So they take a steamboat and went up the coast, up to Skagway and Sitka. Okay, Sitka is a place where the Russian immigrants were important. You know that all this part of the north of British Columbia and Alaska belonged first to Russia and was sold to the United States. But they have left, of course, behind them all these merchants, basically, of fur and all that, Russian merchant, have been there before, have created their village and churches and all that. So Sitka was almost a Russian village. They were also big collectors, these Russian merchants. This is why that to this day in St. Petersburg, in the Hermitage, you do have a very important collection of art of the northwest coast of Canada. Who are in Russian museum because it was collected, and it's old. It's collected in 19th century or even at the end of the 18th. So they visited that, and they had there a place near Skagway who was called the Totem Walk. Well, they have created it, of course, for touristic reason. They had this funny idea to put a series of totem in a forest. Of course, that's not the way at all they were belonging. Normally, the totem is in front of the house, and it tells the story of the family who is there, all their ancestors, including mythic ancestors. But the good people of Skagway thought, okay, we'll make money with this, we'll attract tourism, and we'll make a forest walk, a totem walk. So people were going there, looking at totem. The totem were coming from many villages. They had just nearby the Salish people, and the Tinglet and all that, that were fantastic sculptors. They didn't collect that. They went to Queen Charlotte Island, took some totem there and bring them back there, painted them in lavish color to look fresh. It will be really almost chrome. Anyway, they transformed them, and Emily Carr was very, very impressed by that. And she made this this aquarelle, this watercolor here that you see with a totem, and mix in the forest like that in a kind of, as well as she could. But what she said about that, and I think this is in a way the turning point in her career about the Indian things, she said the Indian people and their art, now this is the new thing, touch me deeply. Perhaps that was what I was giving my sketch the Indian flavor. This is a compliment that an American artist who was living there gave to her, a guy who's called Robertson, who was not very important, but he tell her, your drawings have an Indian flavor. So she was flattered by that, and she repeated this. By the time I reached home, my mind was made up. I was going to picture totem poles in their own village setting, as complete a collection of them as I could. She speaks almost like an anthropologist. Huh? And you understand her shock when she was told that her work is unsuitable for anthropological purpose, huh? Because really what she wanted to do. She says, my mind was made, I want to do this. And it's really there, in Alaska, I would say that you have the turning point, that she began to realize that not only the Indian people, but their heart is the core here, is the thing that was important. Then she goes to Europe a little bit, and she comes back, establishes herself in Vancouver, and finally, in 1912, then begins really her going towards specific site and trying to apply this program that she have created. I will show you different example of this 1912 picture. Unfortunately, this one I don't have in color, but I have, you will see a few others that will give you an idea. It's called Allard Bay. And indeed, it's a representation of the whole bay with 3 canoes here in foreground and the village here in the background. Allard Bay, I don't see it from here, but it's here. This is, let's say, Vancouver Island, and this is the coast of British Columbia. So it's the north-east part of Vancouver Island, where you do have this little place, Allard. Allard Bay was not a very whole Indian village. It was created in 1870, where they created a little industry of canned food there. And so Indians came there, established themselves there, but also the government finally created a special, how I can say, kind of office, let's say, to create the rapport with the Indians, so it became more stable, and indeed there was an important village built there. If to comment what we see here, I think that the first thing I want to stress, you see, she begins to represent in front of the houses the big sculpture or the totem pole. And here, of course, they are in the right situation. They are not packed together in a forest for tourists. You see, they are really used for a real usage. The people she's depicting here are the Kwakiutl people, so very different from the Nukta. They are one of the greatest sculptors of the coast. And they are really extraordinary, talented, and up to this day, they have always created, they are renewed this art completely, and you have sculptor who works in that tradition up to this day. And so it's a more lively type of community. And also you could say Emily Carr was there less time in a way. Say she was passing from one village to there, very excited by what she saw. She took notes on the spot and then worked in studio about all these painting. And so she was in contact in the, so if you look now at the, let's say these 2 totem who are in the back, I will comment the canoe after. You have now, in Allard Bay today, they are more or less, well, with the same type of iconography. I'm not sure it's the same sculpture than in the past, but they have repeated it, and of course there's no more the houses behind. It's a park now. When you go to Allard Bay, you have a nice park with totems like that, and in a way with the same themes, more or less. And the theme here, it is a mixture. You have a kind of huge bird here who looks ominous, who is the thunderbird. It's a very famous part of their mythology. And he's on the head of a grizzly bear. And of course, all this could be explained by myth and legend. Why it's in front of a house and all this is quite logical. And Emily Carr got information from anthropologists. She met Marius Barbeau, she met C. Newcomb and people like that, and she knew about their myth and their mythology. So she mentioned it. She could explain this thing. In short, the myth goes like this. It is a man who was wanting to build his house and got very discouraged because the huge beam that he had to use were too heavy and he could not handle them. And suddenly a big bird appears, if I can say so. The thunderbird appeared and offered to help him. So he takes, and for him to carry these logs was nothing. So he built the house. And after, it creates a kind of bond with this mythical creature. And that's why this family will have always the thunderbird in front of her house. But the thunderbird is not very reliable. He goes and disappears, comes with thunders and lightning, of course, from time to time. But we don't. So they decided to have a more trusted protector of their house. And everybody is afraid of grizzly bear. So they says, okay, we will marry one of our princesses to a grizzly bear, and then he will be in the family, he will not hurt us, and he will protect our house. And that's why you will have in front of their house this double symbol, if you want. The thunderbird on the top and the grizzly bear on the bottom. So now the house is okay, safe, there's no problem. It's, you have two very powerful creatures who will protect you. The canoe that is there are interesting also because it's very close to actual canoe as we can find them in the anthropological literature. I show you one here, a war canoe of northern type, so very close to where Allard Bay and where Emily Carr was. And it's measured 23 feet long, so it's quite big. You could have many people in it. And they are war canoe. That means they are not used for fishing or things like that. They are used to fight against neighbors or enemies and things. And at the time, Newcomb took a little film. I don't have it, but if you go to the Museum of Civilization in Hull, you could see it there. They have reconstructed very beautiful display of all the northwest coast. And you see, they are in the canoe. They are all dressed up with feathers and all that. They are with costume, and they go like this with their wings, and the canoe advance like this, and you say, well, if I was the enemy, I would be afraid by this display of power and of assurance. Let's say they have no fear of being shot at and all that. They just advance against you with this play. Psychological warfare. They're very efficient. And so these were the canoe. And also you have, of course, in front, you see the motif here. It seems to be quite similar to the one you have in the painting here, representing probably a raven, one of the, meaning the god that protects this specific people. So she gets interested in that. She painted 3 of them. And then also she used them, I would say, in an isolated composition like here. See? The same 3 canoes, except that they are seen from another point of view. And Allard Bay seems much further down, much difficult to read the detail of them. And we have here in the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal this one that you may have seen. I think it's on the wall. It's part of our collection. And here it's isolated, but it's the same type of canoe. You see it with the same type of it, except that the animal there is different. Here it's certainly a bird. But here it has been interpreted as a wolf. But there you have to believe me because it's not evident. Let's see. At first I thought it was a frog. But a frog will not be represented with teeth. And it's a good idea. A frog that have no teeth. And so they, or so little that is, but there is have big teeth. And also a very important thing also, the fact that the ears are on the top of the head and not on the side. This is an animal for sure. If the men have ears on the side. Animals have always ears on the top like this. So it have to be, and we thought of a bear also, but a bear will have a much longer snout. And so finally, what the expert think it's a representation of a wolf. Again, a wolf clan will put, of course, a symbol of the wolf on their canoe. So there's another aspect. You see, you could say, well, this is not really their art, but it's certainly their craft, what they can do, and probably quite beautiful shape, in fact. I'd say that to be able to create this seagoing canoe and to show them in that way, it's interesting. But she got interested also to the sculpture, as you will see here in this picture. With Carr, anyway, she gave always the location because she wanted to be accurate. It's a Kwakiutl house, again, a picture of 1912, and in Tla-Watsis. If I go back to the map that I was showing you before, it is, again, you remember you have the big island, Vancouver Island, and then you have the shore. But in between, you have a lot of little islands. So this is one of them, in which they had this big house. So that means after Allard Bay, she probably took a little boat that went from one island to the other to paint this thing. And in this case, what is interesting, we have the watercolor that she did in preparation to the painting. And more interesting in a way, we had a photo she took of the thing herself as a kind of aide-memoire, if you want. When you go back in the studio, you want to remember what it is. And she had this photo that apparently were taken by America herself. Mind you, she said very bluntly, I never use photograph. But since sometimes she's fantasizing a little bit, I think we cannot believe her completely on that. In a way, she's right, in fact, that she used them to start with, maybe, or a kind of a reminder, but she created her own design. But sometimes they are quite close. Like here, there's definitively a kind of relation between both, as if. And this house is fantastic. I mean, it's very elaborated, as you can see. And it was also, I think, so important for the Indians that you see it again in another location nearby, as if after a while they moved their village from one island to the other, but brought with them all the important artifacts that were in the foreground. If you look carefully, you will see the same house is there, but in construction. Can you see it? Maybe not from the back. Then believe me, what can you do? You have no choice. And anyway, the same house is there, but in another island, and being taken by a photographer a little bit after that the painting was done. The motif of this house also are interesting to analyze. On the top here, you have a kind of double-headed serpent. You see it, one head here, another that, and in the middle, a kind of human head. And this is the Sisiutl. It's kind of a mythical creature, very well known in the mythology of the Kwakiutl, and it have represented there. Then you have two statues here, even on each side also, who have a kind of face like this, as if she were making hoo. This is the Tsonokua. I will mention it later. I will show you a better depiction of it, but it's interesting that it's there. And finally, you have two chiefs here holding something that looks like a shield. And this also is an important detail, let's say, of this presentation. Let's say for some, just to illustrate, for instance, the Sisiutl, here you have it, I would say, in a shape of a belt. It was a mythical animal. Of course, it was supposed to be very dangerous. You should not touch it because you turn in stone. And but the tribe who had it as her protector could have a belt with a Sisiutl to protect them. So people saw that, okay, we don't touch these people, they couldn't turn us in stone. They have this powerful creature with them. You have it, for instance, in this kind of, again, it's the same idea. You see a serpent with two heads and in the middle with a human face, exactly like you have here. You have a lot of, this is a wonderful art. It's like jazz. Huh? You have a system on which you can make variation as much as you want, and but the core of it is there all the time. So you recognize the theme, but you can make as many variations as you want. And this is a shaman amulet, you see. So then a shaman, very powerful, so to heal people, could use this little stick, let's see, in ivory, who's precious, and he was wearing it, of course, around his neck. So you can imagine all the, from a huge decoration like this on the top of a house to a little objet that it was wear like this. This is Sissioto. The other detail, like that I mentioned, these men wearing kind of shield. I give you an example of what it is. It's called habitually in the anthropological literature a copper, because it's done in copper. And these objects were exchanged in the potlatch. What happened, the potlatch, as you know, is a kind of competition between tribes in richness. This is a wonderful way to diffuse war and aggressivity. Instead of fighting, you give a feast to your enemy, and you shovel on him so many gifts that he doesn't want to see you anymore, because he will have to give as much. So this was a very beautiful way to diffuse aggressivity and war, and they have this usage. You know that it was at a certain point forbidden by Canadian law to held potlatch. For 70 years, it was absolutely forbidden. This law was cancelled, let's say, only in 1951. So that means that for a very long period, the potlatch disappeared. And this was very, very crucial, because these society are not class society, meaning with slaves and with bourgeois and then chief and things. They are rank society, and it is very different. Each group have a certain rank in comparison with the other. And the way to establish your rank is the potlatch. The one who gives the biggest feast is the first one. The one who cannot compete with the feast that he just got lower. And one of the memorial of this feast was these copper. They were exchanged from tribe to tribe. And when a chief, for instance, could have 3, 4 coppers, he was in a way, able to prove that he was the richest and he was the more powerful one. So that's why they were so important, and that's why, of course, they are represented here in the house of this important chief on the facade. You know, you put your richness, you show it, you show how rich you were. The fact that the potlatch was forbidden created, for instance, the RCMP was coming in the village and confiscating these objects, and in particular the copper, and bringing them to the National Museum. This is one kind of nice outlet for bandits. I don't see which one were bandits here, but so they took these artifacts and bring them to the National Museum. And indeed, the museum that we have in Hull now is very nice because they show all this and all. But I once saw the warehouse of this museum, and it's incredible the amount of things that they have there. They cannot show it. It's all the same. See, if you have 100 coppers, one above the others, it's not interesting. You show 1 or 2, and you show, say, for instance, there's some of them are broken like this. This is interesting because the guy win one of these copper, but not completely. He was not. So they tear apart and they keep the other. Here you see Chief Seward, who's very, look at his face, he's very proud. He showed this one, by the way. This is the same that he have in his hand. And another one, complete, of course, and he's in front of his house, very happy of this display. What is wonderful in this type of usage, I tell it is this kind of, all these people have learned how to deal with aggressivity, how to, I would say, sublimize it and transform it into a feast. Of course, there was some excess. You can imagine if you receive the others and you want to impress them, you give them some booze and things like that. And of course, the missionary find it terrible. And that's why, and even at a certain point, they burned the house, you see, to show how rich they were. They just put the fire, and everybody have a good laugh. It was dangerous, so the police come. And so you understand the kind of pro and con of these things. But what was so grave, I think, so by destroying this, They destroy the memory of these people. They didn't know after 70 years who was the first rank, who was the second rank. And you go very deep then by this law of destroying the memory of the history of the people as they could remember it, you see, through oral tradition and things like that. And when Emily Carr describes some potlatch in her book, hundreds and thousands, for example, described, she was assisting, in fact, to a completely illegal ceremony. And she says it was grand. That was her comment. It was grand. She could have been caught there and put to jail for a few, just to reflect about her love of Indians. Okay. You see, just a picture like that, I think maybe I made a too extended commentary, but what I want to show you is what is important here, what she felt, it is that we are dealing through the heart of the Indians to another vision of the world, in a way to another reality. There's one reality, but there's many realism. There's one reality, but there's many interpretations of what reality is. And of course, here she was dealing with a completely very foreign to her, with mythology and with the kind of mythical creature and all that. And the way she could absorb this is wonderful. This is really different from the attitude of Cain. You see, always seeing them from outside, always describing them like maybe an interesting group of people, but certainly nothing to do with him. You see how we can, with Emily Carr, I could say we can even speak of a kind of Copernican revolution. We have suddenly a completely different point of view of okay, I will show you a few other examples of her work. This one done in Skidgate. And what happened with, she have always this, conversation, let's say, with anthropologists. And she wants to please them in a way. And some of her work done in particularly Skidgate, this is in the Queen Charlotte Islands, so it's very much to the north. And some of the work are less interesting because of that. I think I want to quote you just a little passage of this C.F. Newcomb, who is an anthropologist that she knew. And there was a discussion about giving her a contract to make a mural in a public library. And in his report, he says, if the color could be toned down a little bit, in new copies, see, if she make new copies of what she does, and if certain details of size and accuracy were corrected under proper supervision, meaning him, of course, if she could throw more life into the scene. This is interesting, because what he reproached her, it is not to depict the Indians, to depict only their art. She should put some life in it. She should put some people around that will not see only the totem. So meaning that he doesn't understand at all what she wants to do. And he says, if she does all this, to throw more life into the scene illustrated, then maybe we could give her the contract. And she didn't get it, of course. So she knew that. She, maybe not directly, she didn't really read the report itself, but Newcomb must have conveyed something. You need supervision, or whatever he told her. Anyway, so you will see some of the pictures seems more classic in a way, more accurate. She tried to correspond. This one in Skidgate, and let's say, well, this is much later, in 1942, because it's the same subject, more or less, that's why I put it together, but it doesn't demonstrate what I want to say now. Let's see, this is a kind of depiction of a shark also, with these big teeth, they're very, very dangerous. And I don't need to point it, you see them, are here. And this kind of a slit that he have under his nose here, depicted here. But the main example I wanted to show you is this painting, was called Tanu. Tanu is another village in the Queen Charlotte Islands on the north. And yeah, if you compare it, let's see, to photography of the time, you will see that she tried to be as accurate as possible. And also in terms of composition, as if she wanted to be frontal, you see, like, just to depict the totem pole as they are, one beside the other, reconstruct a little bit the houses that they will look more fresh, and after all, we are making history here, and with sharp outline. And let's see, the feeling we get, it is less imaginative, less creative, because she's controlled by this guy. Yeah, for instance, we have a photo of her painting this picture, in fact. You see her, well, preparing, let's say, probably the watercolor for this picture. And what the photo demonstrates that she could not really see exactly like she depicted here. Look at the rushes here, how big they are and all that. Probably she had to stand up and then sit down and move, and she could not depict the things exactly like it is. And in fact, it's closer to, no, sorry, this is the one. It's closer to the photo that I was showing you here, done by an anthropologist. So there is a kind of effort like this to correspond to their, but happily this didn't last much. So finally you will see she have created, in the contrary, in her own style, her reaction to it. And then this is a bit later picture. This corresponds, I would say, to the last Indian theme in her work. And after, of course, what will take over is the forest that I was showing you in the beginning. So this one is called the Tsonokua, the Kuyasdom, well, this is the name of the place where she did it. Kuyasdom Tsonokua. The Tsonokua is a kind of mythical personage also. I think I have here, well, let's see, this is the watercolor to prepare the painting. You have the painting on the left, which is at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. And it's, let's say, a very good example of her later work on Indian theme. The Tsonokua, what it was in their mythology, it is a kind of, I would say, dangerous creature. The parents used to say to their kids, go to bed. If you roam too much in the forest, the Tsonokua will catch you and she will bring you in her house and eat you. We have heard also things like that in our childhood. We had, say, the Sandman and everything. Every culture has this. It's a way to get kids to bed. Say, what can we do? Well, it's a system that works everywhere. So so they had, and she's always represented like this with a kind of round-shaped mouth, and she make hoo, 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 like this. She make a kind of strange sounds, and her eyes habitually are very deep set, if you want, and with she's described as having kind of charcoal hues, you see, as if the eyes were in fire. And habitually she's represented with a kind of bag on her back where she gets the children, and she goes like this in the forest. And the description that Emily Carr made of her encounter with the Tsonokua is interesting, because probably what she saw is this one. I think it's quite close to their picture. And she says, okay, I was walking on a kind of sidewalk made in wood, and it was full of slug there, see? And she slept, she says, I fell, and when I look above, what I saw was this sculpture. And it says, I was very afraid at first to see this apparition like that in my field of vision. And then she described it, of course, beautifully. She says, her head and trunk were carved out of, or rather into, the bole of a great red cedar. She seems to be part of the tree itself, as she have grown there as its heart, and the carver had only chipped away the outer wood so that you could see her. It is, you know, this is almost a quotation of Michelangelo also saying that the statue is in the marble. The only thing you have to do is to get it out from there. So try it, you will see it. See, the statue is inside. And a little bit, I think she referred to that maybe unconsciously. Her arms were spliced and socketed to the trunk. Of course, you have not a huge tree like that, so it was added to the trunk, if you want, and were flung wide in a circling, compelling movement. Her breasts were two eagles' heads fiercely carved. That much, and the column of her great neck and her strong chin I had seen when I slittered on the ground beneath her. Now I saw her face, and then suddenly she little by little, she see it. And she have made a few versions of the Tsonokua. I guess Also, it's a female figure, a kind of ambivalent figure. I think this could be interesting to develop also to try to find why she was so fascinated. She made another one, who she called the Tsunokuwa of the cat village. Then again, she described it as a, and you see the cat village, of course it is because some of these villages are used only in winter. The winter is the time of festival, of feast. The tsetseka, they call it. And of course, the summer, the spring and autumn is time to work. So some villages are used only for a feast. So if you bring the cats there and you leave them there, of course, they get, first of all, they get bored, so they multiplied. And, and she described when she was working on this picture, they came to her and all that. So they needed probably human presence and all that. Emily Carr described the personage here that we have found, I think, also in the sculpture. This is probably the sculpture she used. She described it as the Tsunokuwa, but you will see this is not sure at all. But let's see. She appeared to be neither wooden nor stationary, but a singing spirit, young and fresh, passing through the jungle. Describe well what we see on the left here. No violence coarsened her, no power domineer to wither her. She was graciously feminine. Across her forehead, her creator has fashioned a sisiotl. You see the double serpent? Yeah, well, not with the head here, but let's say. So across her forehead, she says she has this, this sisiotl theme, or mythological two-headed sea serpent. You see, she have made her class, she knows what it is. On its head fell to either shoulder, hiding the stuck-out ears and framing her face from a central parting on her forehead, which seems to increase its womanliness. I guess at the time to have a kind of departing hairs like this on this side was womanly, but anyway, maybe some users have changed since. In fact, poor Emily Carr was wrong. It's not at all the Tsunokuwa. It's a chief, it's a man. It's the owner of the house that you see behind there that is being represented. And one detail she didn't mention, it is that he holds a copper. You see what he have in his hand here? It's one with a copper. So it's typical of a chief representation holding his copper like this. And what she finds so feminine in a way was not nothing at all to do with it. In the contrary, it is one sign of power to have the sisiotl with you and to scare your enemy. And, but who cares? In a way, she had one interesting intuition. The Tsunokuwa is the guardian of the copper. So without knowing it, maybe, she made, in fact, kind of an interesting connection with this. Very well, maybe I could go a little bit faster there. Well, you see, for instance, in Kuitangkul, which is in the north, but not on the island of the Queen Charlotte Island, on the ground. Very difficult to access this village, and she was very interested by this forest of totem pole. It's there that she made this famous representation of a mother, a totem mother in Kitwankul. She transposed it fantastically because it's here as if she take only this detail and enlarge it and created this very forceful figure also. I don't have the slide of the finished painting, but it gives a good idea of what it was. This is the preparatory drawing that she did. Again, this type of mother theme, but with power. It's not, it's feminine, but it's not at all associated to kind of sentimentality or anything of that kind. And to finish with, I guess I could not mention this very famous picture. It's called Blondin Harbor. Blondin Harbor is also in the Kwakiutl region. And it's based, again, on a photograph, probably. As you can see, the main difference between the photograph and her painting, it is the absence of people there. The interpretation of this big figure there have varied, of course, as you can imagine. For instance, one of my colleagues, who's called Barry Lord, have written an interesting book. It's called Towards a People Heart. Barry is a good Marxist. I don't know if he's still Marxist after what all happened, but at the time he was. And he says, well, these powerful figures show the need of revenge of the native people against the white who have destroyed them and everything. So he saw almost say, this is a communist thing, of course, as you know, as if the... In fact, it's, yeah, so we discussed, well, he says, you are not right. What it is Potlatch figure. And it's linked indeed to a myth of competition between two giants. And that's who they are represented. Here, this is the winning one. And you have another one in the back here, we don't see him much, who just lift a finger to show that he is the best of the two. So the legend goes, it's two giants with a lot of power, and they challenge each other. Who is the strongest? So one can tear a whale by the tail, like this, in two parts. So you have to be strong. And the other could unroot a tree like this, just with a... And, of course, one win. And you understand then, in the context of Potlatch, why this figure are there. It's about competition. It's about competition of strength and of richness. And so one of the giants will receive you, make the gesture of a winner, and the other just show him with his finger, this is the winner. So it's a way to receive the people. On the other hand, the fact that she suppressed the people on the wharf could go a little bit toward the intuition that Barry had about this kind of the plague of this of the native people, so the difficulty they had to survive with the white surrounding and all that. Maybe it was maybe a more powerful way to express it than just to show a sign of aggressivity. You understand also that, to conclude all this, that what I've discussed now about America represents only one part of her achievement. You cannot summarize all her career around the theme of realism. She's interested by so much other things, but if there is one aspect of her work that fit a little bit this theme, it is the Indian work, because intentionally she wanted to be realistic. She wanted to depict what she saw. It was not as well received as she thought, but now who cares of newcomers? All these people are forgotten. She remains, and that's what's important. That was so wonderful with art. Artists could live 300 years. You see, it's fantastic. Okay, we're finished with that.